Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from Step by Step Painting, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint Winding Autumn Drive. I'm doing this on a 9x12 canvas, and this is a fun design where you can actually extend. I don't do this often with the stretched canvases for some reason, but you can extend the design off the sides of the canvas. It looked really cool with the road. And let's go over brushes and colors first. We will be using light blue permanent, Mars black, raw umber, cadmium orange hue, primary yellow, and Napthol Crimson. All of these are the Liquitex Basics colors with the exception of the brown and the orange. Those are Royal and Langnickel. I believe Walmart has that brand. It's a little bit cheaper than the Basics if you're looking for a cheaper alternative to the Basics, which can be kind of pricey, but I love the Basics. For the colors, we have the brushes, we have 3/4 flat, 12 bright, 4 round, and an 8 round. I always talk about how much I love this 8 round brush because it's thick and then it has a thin point to it, which is very helpful for those thinner branches. If you don't have that exact 8 round brush, you can get like one of these little miniature mini brushes, and there's a few fine line details in this, like where the road is and some of the smaller branches, so a little brush is helpful for this. You'll also need a regular drawing pencil because there is a little bit of drawing in this, and a ruler. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm using a 9x12, however you can do this on any size rectangular canvas. You can even try it on a square canvas if you want to do it that way. The first thing we need to do with a landscape painting such as this is find where our horizon line is going to be. In this one, our horizon line is the exact center, so locate the center of the canvas. Mine is 12 inches high, so I measured 6 inches and drew a horizontal line very lightly. We don't want this line to be super dark because we don't want it to show up in the end, but very lightly, and that's going to be a guideline to help us draw our road. So the line of the road on the right starts at about where the corner is, and over here on the left, it starts about 1.5 inches from the bottom. The road is very, very wide. We're going to do kind of this forced perspective thing where it gets very narrow very fast. And I want a windy road, so here on the left, I'm having my line kind of swirl to the left, and then I'm having my line on the right kind of parallel to that. And notice how I'm kind of sketching this out. I'm not going to get a perfect line right away, but if I keep sketching it, I'll eventually form it into the way I want it to be. So notice how my road goes a little bit above the horizon line. That's okay. We can assume that the land just kind of goes up a little bit. Our road is very abstract and kind of disappears way in the distance, so we can have it kind of elevate up a little bit, but it needs to go very, very thin. It doesn't go to a point, but it gets very, very thin. It swoops very sharply to the left, almost goes horizontally as it goes to the left. And notice how it gets very wide very fast towards the bottom of the canvas. So once you sketch your road the way that you want it, you can start loading your palette with the 2 colors, black and white. The first step is very easy. We're going to paint the entire road a solid color of black without doing any kind of shading or anything like that. We're just going to paint it black. I'm also going to load white on here because after we paint it black, we will add some highlights to that road. But for now, we're just going to do solid color black. Use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. I decided to use the 12 bright brush, so that's the 1/2 inch flat brush. You can load that into a little bit of water and then load your brush into the paint. You can start at the bottom. So we want to paint our road with all left and right strokes, with the exception of the lining the edges of it. We can use the tip of the brush to help cut in on that shape. So we can use the tip of the brush to outline, and we can use the full width of the brush to paint left and right strokes to fill in that as a solid black color. So you might find that you want to switch brushes, and you can, especially when we get way back here where it gets very narrow and kind of hard to fill in. So if you want to switch to a round brush, you are definitely welcome to. You might also find that as you're painting this road in, you're adjusting your drawing. So you don't have to fill in the lines exactly how you drew it. You can adjust it. So right here, I ended up kind of just curving my strokes to get that filled in. But for the bigger areas, we want to do left and right strokes. Fill it in all solid. So before this dries, we want to start introducing some gray into this. Ideally, we would like our road to be light way in the distance and dark towards the bottom. Without rinsing the brush, I'm going to grab a little bit of white right there in my brush and make kind of a gray. So this is pretty saturated down here, and doing this only does a little bit of effect, but it still does something. I'm doing left and right strokes, gently blending this gray towards the bottom. And you can see it's just making these light gray sort of strokes in there, and I'm not going to blend it all the way. It just gave our road a little bit of texture, a little bit of lightness towards the bottom. Now let's rinse our brush all the way and get the round brush. So I'm going to work on the road that's far in the distance. That needs to be lighter. So let's grab some titanium white, and I'm going to do, again, we want left and right strokes. So I don't want this to be solid white because it's just going to disappear and look like the canvas again. So very, very light. Maybe add a teeny bit of black in there. So it's not pure white. It should be a very light gray. And I'm going to do left and right strokes. So if you're like me and that black dried, it's not blending or anything, and that's okay. Left and right strokes, and leaving a lot of that black still kind of showing through. I'm not trying to cover up all that first layer, but it's light, and then we can start gradually letting this get darker as we work our way down. By darker, I mean adding more black in there to darken that gray, but it doesn't have to be a perfect gradient. We have a road. The idea is to make it very, very light as that road disappears. Down here, I'm adding a few more lighter strokes. One of the last steps in this painting is to go back over our road with some dry brush, lighter strokes, and we'll do that later on. This is just kind of the first layer of our road. I'm going back and adding lighter color way in the distance and letting that just kind of fade and get slightly darker towards the bottom. The bottom, the very, very bottom of our road should be mostly black with a few gray strokes in there. I'm going to go back with gray, make this kind of a darker gray down here so that it still has that kind of like left and right round brush texture like the rest of the road. But make sure that this is darker towards the bottom. By doing dark at the bottom and light way in the distance, that's going to give your road an illusion that it has depth, that it's going further and further in the distance, getting lighter as it gets further away and darker as it's closer. So I'm adding a little bit more black and dark gray towards the bottom, medium gray in the middle, and it should be very light gray far away. But you see how it's not like smooth, perfect gradient? It's left and right strokes, and it doesn't blend smoothly, and that's okay. So let's go ahead and rinse our brush, and let's do the sky next. Before we can do anything else to this road, such as that beautiful yellow, two solid yellow lines, we have to let this dry. And so we'll do the sky next. For the sky, I used light blue permanent and titanium white. So load your palette with both of those colors, and we'll be using the 3/4 flat brush. So load the brush in water, tap it dry. Let's mix about equal amounts of blue and white together. So it kind of lightens this blue up. I'm going to do kind of these like short choppy strokes. If you prefer to just do left and right strokes, you can. A lot of this sky is going to be covered up with trees, so if there's like imperfections in it, it's not going to be noticeable in the end. What we want to try to achieve here is the sky darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. Also is going to give your sky a sense of depth, because in the sky, things are lighter towards the horizon line, things are generally darker towards the top. So right here, I'm going to bring this down all the way to that horizon line. I know our road goes up into the sky, and that's okay, but we want to make sure our sky goes all the way to the bottom so that we don't have any blank white canvas showing through in the end. So it should be a very light blue down here, because I have mostly white on my brush, but still a little bit of blue showing. So I can do left and right strokes there, go around our road. We need to paint that sky under the road, that's okay too. Around that, so there's no canvas left unpainted above that horizon line. And if we need to go back with more blue towards the top, we can. So I can bring this, grab more blue at the top. Bring that down, and it doesn't have to blend perfectly. The next thing we're going to do is fill up the area to the left and the right of the road, and that is going to be done with brown, orange, and white. So I'm going to load my palette with raw umber, Cad Orange Hue, and we can do some fresh titanium white if needed. And I'll be using a number 12 bright brush. So our land in this has a very brownish orange color to get the fall vibes in this drive that we're doing. And so let's load our brush in the water. You might at this point decide you want to clean your water out because we used a lot of black at first. Let's grab brown and white and orange, about equal parts of all those colors. I want to get kind of a lightish orangish brown, and you guessed it, in the distance our color is going to be lighter and it's going to be darker towards the bottom. So we're going to think very abstractly here about this ground. We're not going for super high hyperrealism, but we need to cover all this blank canvas before we can add our trees. So I'm going to start in the distance, and I'm going to just do these like little short, kind of choppy, almost rounded strokes on both sides of the road, and to really define that land that kind of dips up a little bit and makes our road look like it's not in the sky. So our road is now attached to the ground. And I'm just going to keep kind of filling in both sides, little choppy strokes. And as I work my way down, I'm going to add more orange, so it's kind of brighter, and I'll add more brown too and make it a little bit darker. And then you saw me kind of outline the edge of the road, and that's kind of necessary to get that filled up. Just like when we painted the road, we kind of outlined it. So you can kind of do the same thing with your land. Again, right now the focus really is just kind of covering this area. Little choppy textured strokes. And we can do the same thing on the left side. Use the tip of the brush to outline that road. And then fill in your land area with little short choppy strokes. So towards the bottom of our painting, a little bit more orange and brown. I'm actually going to add more brown down here, make it a little bit more shadowy. Try your best not to cover any of the road with your land. I know it's kind of hard because we're doing these like choppy strokes, and our stroke that we make, it might end up going over the road a little bit. If that happens, it's okay. We can always go back and kind of touch up our road. But right here along the road, I did this to the right side as well, adding a little bit of little dark kind of choppy stroke on the edge of the land that's close to the road. And then for the rest of the land, these like angled choppy strokes. And then if we're working further in the distance, a little bit more light colored, so a little bit more white on the brush so that it's lighter in the distance. So it's not all solid color everywhere. We kind of mixed our colors a little bit. Darker towards the bottom and towards the sides of the road, and kind of lighter in the distance. So we create texture in this landscape by altering the colors and doing choppy strokes. It's very kind of loose, impressionistic style. We are going to detail our road next, and we will be using the number 4 round brush. And I'm going to start by going back over the left and right edge of our road with black. So any part of the landscape that might have accidentally overlapped it, this is just a minor touch-up. I'm just going back in with the black, and I am outlining the far edge of this road with a very thin black line. So like right here, when we get to in the distance, I'm not really going to take that black all the way back there because it's going to turn to white. It's going to get light and kind of disappear. But down here, just outlining the far edge of that road with the black. I'm not overlapping my landscape. This is just the outline on the road itself. So don't go off the road. Stay where that original shape is. And then I'm not going to go all the way. I'm just going to let that kind of disappear off into the distance. Next, let's rinse our brush off and use titanium white. I am going to do the white lines that are on the road. So if you don't feel confident with this quite yet, you can get like a piece of chalk or chalk pencil and draw these out first and then paint them in. I'm doing one line at a time, so this isn't exactly the center of the road. It's a little bit more to the left. And I'm going to do like this triangle thing, so it's thicker at the bottom edge of the canvas, and then it goes very thin, very fast to like a point. So it's going to look like a triangle at first. I'm going to get to about right here and stop. And then I'm going to go to this, where that horizon line is, or vanishing point in the road where it disappears. And I'm going to use just the tip of the brush. Again, we're not center, a little bit left of center here, because we're doing 2 lines. But that one was a very thin line, a thin continuous line that goes down and connects to our triangle here. So it gives us the illusion that it's wide at the bottom, and then further away, that line gets smaller, thinner, and then sort of disappears. So I'm just going back in, touching that one up. Remember, it's very thick at the base, and then continues up and gets thinner. So I can take this, and instead of it looking more like a triangle, I can actually kind of thicken that line, but I don't need it. It cannot be the same thickness throughout, so it has to get very thin. We can start doing our second line. So I kind of did the same thing, started with my triangle shape. We want to Maybe leave a quarter to 1/8 inch gap between the two lines at the bottom. You can space them further apart if you want, but this line starts out like the little triangle, and then it gets thinner in the distance. At some point, these lines are going to create the illusion that they meet together and then turn into one solid yellow line. So about right here, they get so close together that they just become united. So there they go, they meet together and sort of disappear in the distance. You can go back, bring that out, make it same thickness. If you need to go back in and touch up the gap between there with black, you can, or even the edging of it, you can go back with black and touch that up after that white dries. The next thing I'm going to do is add white on the edging of the road. So I want to do this not on the very, very edge. So remember how we did that black line again? I don't want to go over that. I'm going right next to that black line that I did. That step before we did those white lines, we did a black line. I'm taking this white, it is a thin line, and it's right next to that black line. So you can see that black line is still the far edge, and then there's a white line. And it's just disappears as we get further in the distance. And it is technically just a little bit thicker down here. So I can take my stroke and let it be thicker towards the bottom of the canvas. And then it goes thin and just kind of disappears. This step actually, if you have one of those little detail miniature brushes, that would be helpful. Not for these thicker strokes, it would be frustrating for the thick strokes, but for the very thin strokes in the distance, that can be helpful. So you can kind of switch between two brushes as you're doing this. So same thing over here on the right side of the road, we have that. This line is not as thick as our center line, so you can see it's much thinner than it, but it starts out thicker on the bottom, and then to get that line to be thinner, I'm just lightly holding my brush. You can get thin lines just by holding your brush very lightly and using just barely the tip. When I get back here, I could switch to a detail miniature brush that can help me make this line thinner, but I'm just going to keep my round brush. This is the number 4 round brush. See how that just kind of disappears. Next, let's load our palette with primary yellow. We are going to go back over our center lines and repaint that with yellow. So if your white is not 100% dry, it's okay. Mine's not 100% dry. But if it's soaking wet and your yellow's just smearing and not working, let the white dry and then come back to this step. I'm just taking this yellow and I'm going back over everything I just painted with the white very carefully. If you end up going outside of your line a bit, that's okay. You want to, for the most part, stay on that. And I'm taking this yellow, even like back here, I'm adding that yellow. If you want, you can actually just let the far back be white and have that yellow turn into white. But I just went ahead and painted the entire thing yellow. I'm not going to highlight it or anything or make that yellow look darker at the bottom. It stays the same shade of yellow all throughout. You can go ahead and rinse and dry. I'm going to go back and do a few touch-ups specifically with the black and the in-between part right here where my yellow just kind of went outside the lines a little bit. We can go ahead and detail that a little bit better, touch that up if needed. Twisting that brush allows you to get that paint on the tip of the brush, allows those bristles to gather together to help you paint your fine detail lines. Right here on the edges, I'm touching that up as well. We are going to start filling in our landscape with the trees next, and I am going to start way in the distance with our light colored trees. So these trees are going to look kind of weird and awkward at first, and that's okay. I want to make on my palette a very light orangish brown color, very similar to that first color we used in the landscape that's way in the distance, only more white. And so on my palette, I'm mixing a very light brownish orange color, and I'm using my number 4 round brush. So I'm going to start way back here in the distance, and I'm just going to paint these vertical lines. These are trees that are so far away. They look very abstract. It's hard to figure out what kind of trees they are because they're so far away. I'm actually going to load some more white on my palette. I want this to be a little bit lighter, add a little bit more white, a little water in there. The water kind of loosens that paint up a little bit, especially if I'm doing small details in my painting. Twisting that brush, get those bristles gathered at the point, and it gets that paint right there at the tip of the brush. I'm going to do little dots to make it look like there's leaves on these trees in the distance. Little dots. Not all of those lines ended up having dots. Some of them were just lines without dots. We can add some more trees. But again, it's going to look kind of weird at first. Not super realistic. Could do some of these trees. I could even make it look like maybe we can see some of the branches. So maybe some of these can branch off. You can see the top of the tree canopy. But these are super far away. Some of them a little bit taller down the road. Can make some right here in particular. We can see some of the branches. There's a piece of dog hair on my bristle. It keeps showing up on my paint stroke and then disappearing and then showing up again. And then so a few more trees. So those are our far away, abstract looking trees. Very small, very light in color. And then I'm going to switch gears here, and then I'm going to do the trees that are up close. For some reason, I wanted to do the far away trees and then the super up close trees, and then I did the ones in the middle after the ones up close. That just, for some reason, that made sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to you, you can do your mid-level trees and then your big trees next. So I'm taking my number 8 round brush, and I have brown and black mixed together. A little bit of water to kind of loosen this up. Twist that brush to get that paint distributed. This is that number 8 round brush. The one I was telling you in the beginning. It has a really nice point to it. I can do thick strokes and thin strokes with just one brush. So this is my up close tree that I'm sketching out the base of the trunk. So the base of the trunk kind of flutes out, and the branches go up very high. This is a larger tree. In fact, a lot of the branches reach the very top edge of the canvas. That's how tall this tree is. And it's very dark. It's up close, so it's darker. I can use the tip of the brush to create those thinner branches just by applying light pressure on the brush, and I can create thick branches by pressing harder on the brush, and that creates thicker strokes. Then we're going to create a similar tree on the left side. It's almost like we're starting out with like a triangle for the base because the trunk gets wide and fluted out at the bottom, and then it goes thinner, and then our branches go outwards. So when we do the thinner parts of the branch, I'm using mostly that tip of the brush. If you're using a different brush, you can switch to like your detail brush when you create the thinner branches. You can also create these branches with an angle brush, whatever brush you feel most comfortable with when painting tree branches. I'm just taking my time. This is a tall tree. A little bit of water kind of helps. You just don't want to water it down too much to where it's dripping down your canvas. So taking those branches, going up towards the top of the canvas. Now we need to paint some of these in-between trees, and to kind of achieve that, let's grab a little bit of white and mix that into our gray color, or our black and brown color. So it's going to lighten that color up. So these trees that are kind of in the middle, I'm going to intentionally make them a little bit lighter than the ones towards the front, and make them look like they're a little bit thinner. So that's going to create the illusion that they're further away. Grabbing a little bit more of that white, kind of intentionally highlighting that right side of that tree trunk. But see these branches up here? Those look lighter than the ones in the front. So I'm going to make another little guy that's right next to that tree that I just did. Same style, more vertical, more kind of thinner. The branches don't spread out as wider. The branches stay kind of closer and more narrow, if that makes sense. So back here we have a tree that's taller than those far away abstract trees that we did, but a little bit darker. And our branches can extend up a little bit higher. Down here, I can make sure I'm using kind of a medium to dark gray color. And the branches just kind of get all tangled up with each other up here, and that's okay. Can take a little bit of white, can highlight the part of the tree that faces the road. Can have another light colored tree branch. So I'm just slowly kind of building these trees, just paying attention to what part of the road I'm on. So if I'm lower in the canvas, my trunks are going to be bigger. If I am further up the road, my trunks are going to be thinner, lighter in color. I'm going to use black and mostly just the tip of my brush to create some low-lying kind of branchy things. So down here, like a smaller kind of plant just growing next to that tree, using the tip of the brush. I can also go back and kind of highlight or texture some of these darker trees with the white, making that white kind of more of a gray color and not pure white, but just do like these vertical strokes with that lighter color, and that's going to texture your tree a little bit, highlight it so it's not solid. Definitely, if you are simplifying this painting, you don't have to go back and highlight and texture. You can just keep those trees solid black, and that is also okay. I'm going to just take that white and kind of gently kind of blend that in with some of these upper branches. We are going to rinse that brush off, set it to the side, and start working on our lovely fall leaves. And I'm going to introduce the color Napthol Crimson to my palette and use the 12 bright brush. So I'm not going to load this brush in the water at all. I'm going to make sure that it's dry, no dripping water from it. We want to create sort of thick strokes of paint. I'm going to start with the two larger trees that I painted and add this kind of in the edge region of the canvas, although we can pretty much apply that red everywhere. And I'm doing these in like these impressionistic little kind of choppy strokes, angles that are kind of going in different directions. It's like I'm dabbing that brush kind of wherever, but still kind of in clusters where the ends of the branches are. So I'm leaving a lot of room for my other colors because I'm going to be using orange and yellow mixed with white for this. So I'm not overpowering all these trees with red. So then let's load our palette with some orange. We don't have to rinse our brush for this. We can just grab the orange and we can start adding our little clusters of orange leaves. Just dabbing the tip of the brush. Some of my strokes are more like a square stroke. Some of my strokes are more narrow and thinner. There's a variety here. Some of the smaller trees are getting smaller strokes, and then the larger trees that are closer are getting larger strokes. But also leaving room for yellow. And I'm not trying to cover up all the red. So there's some of that orange that might be overlapping the red, but I'm not covering it up. The next two colors of leaves I'm going to do are yellow and yellow mixed with white. So without rinsing the brush, let's do this yellow. This yellow is going to look a little bit darker because I still have reddish colors and orange colors on my brush. So as I'm dabbing these, it might end up just turning orange or a dark yellow color, and that's okay. So again, adding that, I'm doing it mostly towards like the center part of our tree canopy. And then I'm going to load some titanium white and yellow on my brush. This is going to create lighter colors, and that white is mixing with whatever colors I still have on my brush, red, orange, yellow. And it's creating lighter color, brighter color leaves. And I'm just going back over, but not with the intent to cover everything up, just creating another layer. Some of that lighter color added some more to the trees that are kind of further away. A little bit more orange. So you decide if you want more of a red dominance in your leaves or more of a yellow dominance or a mix of all the colors. That can be up to you. I was going for a very colorful look, so a mix of all the colors. I'm going to rinse my brush off completely, and I'm going to add some pure yellow and pure yellow mixed with white leaves in here that are not mixed, so more of a yellow color. So when you mix yellow and white together, it's going to create a really pretty bright yellow color. And then I'm going to add some of those bright yellow colors. Of course, it's going to blend anyway if I'm going over some of my wet paint, but we can get that really bright yellow color in our tree canopy. A little bit to the trees that are further away. Because our ground is orange dominant, it might be hard to see some of the orange leaves. So you can add more red or more bright yellow in that area if you want more leaves to kind of stand out in that area. Next, I'm going to create some more texture in the ground, specifically darker colors. So I'm going to load my palette with raw umber, and I'm going to use the 12 bright brush for this. Load the tip of the brush with the brown. I'm going to do these like little grass sort of strokes down here. kind of dragging my brush upwards in different angled direction. This is specifically on the left and the right side, closer to the bottom of the canvas. And it's on the side of the road, so a little, just kind of dragging the brush upwards and kind of different angles, not trying to cover the first layer, just creating kind of a second layer of texture down there. Then I want to get my orange and I want to kind of overlap the base of some of these tree trunks to make it look like there's some leaves or land or some kind of shrubbery kind of disguising the very base of those trees. Just kind of dabbing my brush on the close-up trees. This is orange with a little bit of brown. As we get further in the distance, we don't have to really add much texture back there. I can go back with some yellow. That yellow really brightens it up a little bit, gives it some pop of bright color. Just dabbing the brush. A little bit of texture just on the side of the road. Very abstract, loose style painting. I could add a little bit pop of yellow way in the distance, but we can't get super detailed back there because things just kind of disappear. A little pop of yellow between some of the trees. And we can do some more pops of yellow down here. More dog hair in my paintbrush. I usually have at least 2 of my dogs. I have 3 dogs now. At least 2 of my dogs like to lay on the ground by me when I'm painting. The fan is blowing, so we have hair blowing around sometimes. So that's good for the texture. We can add more if we want, but I don't want to go overdo it. And really the rest of this painting is kind of touch-ups. I am going to do another significant thing to my road later, but I want to go in with the black and kind of touch up a little bit in here. Take that black, go back in here, that edging on the side of the road, just re-outlining that. I really wanted my road to look very more precise and crisp in this and compared to the landscape, which is a little bit more messy. Going back over this outline as well. I am then going to go back with the white, touch up my white as well. So these touch-ups are optional. If you like the way your road is, you don't want to mess with it, then move along to the next step. I'm going to go back with my white, specifically back here. Really want that to look very bright back there. A little bit of white on the side of the road, little horizontal lines on the road itself. Gives it a little bit of a shiny look way, way in the distance. A few almost dry brush style strokes. And we'll do some dry brushing on the road towards the bottom. There's a little bit of shine at the bottom of the road that we'll do. And kind of one of the last steps in this, but we're not going to do that just yet. Touch this up right here. Trying not to lose the consistency of that line, so it needs to go thin and then a little bit thicker on the edge. Then I'm going to go in and add some more branches. Maybe there's a few that are overlapping that road a bit. Maybe there's a few that are hanging a little bit towards the road. Maybe there's branches that don't have leaves or they're low-lying branches. So you can add a little bit more variety in this. You can even go up into your tree canopy and add branches that are overlapping. So not all of your leaves have to be overlapping all the branches. You can add some branches that are overlapping your leaves. So I'm doing that with the number 4 round brush. I'm just going in and adding branches, going up into the canopy area, adding some branches that are showing over the leaves. Our tree canopy, all like on both sides of the trees, they kind of meet together, curl over the road and meet together in the middle. So you can have some of your branches kind of growing towards each other. So this next step, I actually really liked this effect for some reason. I got kind of excited with this. But anyway, we're going to dry brush some shiny marks in the road, specifically towards the bottom. Let's use a 12 bright brush in titanium white. Let's wipe the brush off so we don't have a lot of paint on our brush. And let's very gently do these like thick horizontal strokes. And yes, some of them do overlap our yellow line. It gives our road pretty shiny white marks, and it should not be bright white. It should not be the same consistency as the white line on the side of the road. It should be very translucent and see-through. And that's it for the road. Let's assume that there are leaves on the ground, or at least leaves falling towards the ground. So we're going to go back with our 4 round brush, and I'm just going to do these little marks. These are not gigantic marks like some of the marks in the trees. I feel like it would look too busy and might take too much away from my road. So I'm just doing smaller, maybe towards the bottom. Some of these are a little bit bigger. And then far away, we have little dots, just with the red, the orange, the yellow, to make it look like there's some leaves in the road. You can even mix white with some of that color. But again, I don't want to overdo. I can have some of them kind of off the side of the road. The rest of this painting really is for you to decide when to stop making leaves. When I do fall paintings, I do go crazy and I don't ever want to stop doing leaves. So I like to go crazy with my leaves. But if you don't want to do that many fall leaves, you can stop. I'm also going to do a few more branches. I'm going to take this guy, kind of complicate him a little bit more. He's on the side of the road. I kind of wanted him to overlap part of that road, but then I decided I didn't want him to overlap too much. If you want, you can detail your trunks a little bit more. You can add some highlight and texture to the right side of your trunks, tree trunks, or the left side. I did the side facing the road for some reason. Adding a little bit of white in there kind of helps that to pop a little bit. And then I decided I want to do some more red in my leaves. Sometimes it's fun to mix the white with our color. So if you mix a little bit of white with your red, I'll show you here, did some more pure red. But when you mix white with it, it gives it kind of a pink color. So I did more red. The red was mostly on the outer parts, so towards the edges of the canvas. But mixing the red and white, especially down here where it's dominated by that orange color, adding that white is going to allow some of those leaves to stand out in the lower areas where it's overlapping the land. We are just about finished with this. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this is if you're working on a stretched canvas, so the sides, this is a great painting where you can extend the sides. So I'm going to do this here. I didn't record myself doing all of the sides here, but what you can do is you can just extend this. So this is black, and then when this black dries, I'll do the yellow and extend that down. Extend this on the left, and whatever color, so the sky side would be blue, and then the orange side would be like orange mixed with brown. So I'm just extending the design. I know my camera is kind of wobbling right now, so I'll show you the results of that. So I did the line extended down, and then the designs pretty much simplified on the sides. So it kind of looks fun. So that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint Winding Autumn Drive. Hope you enjoyed this painting. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.